One of the neighbors had brought up that maybe there was some raptors that had built nests there. The applicant had previously conducted a wildlife survey and didn't find any raptor habitats or any other type of endangered habitats. We did refer this application to Colorado Parks and Wildlife Division. They've commented on it, and we're also going to be doing in this development plan that we're concurrently reviewing, we've required the applicant to do a tree analysis, make sure that, if there's any trees that under Commerce City Code need to either be protected or mitigated, they will. And we'll certainly make sure that there's no animal habitats that are in there either. Perimeter fencing was another concern that came up. That was dealt with a little bit more with Richmond American Homes, the home builder. I know that they have agreed to install some fencing in certain areas so as to not affect their the neighboring properties' fences. So that's basically what it came up. I felt that we had come to a good conclusion on most of these issues, and certainly appreciate all of the public input that we received. Next slide. So with that, the Development Review Team recommends that the Planning Commission vote to forward this request to City Council with a recommendation for approval. That'll be all, and I'm here for questions if you have any. Thank you.
Questions for staff from the commissioners?
I do. On that right in, right out, where is the access if you had to go left? Do you show that on the map just so we're all clear?
So when you say left, do you mean south on Brighton Road?
Yeah, right now you ride in and you ride out. But if you had to take a left turn, are people crossing, I'm going to call it illegally, or would there be a barrier in the street in terms of improvements so that you wouldn't go left? Or if you had to go left, you right out, how far up do you have to go to be able to go left to turn back around?
Absolutely. I'm not sure how far north on Brighton Road you'd have to go for a turnaround, though the intention is that nobody would be going left there. If you needed to go south on Brighton Road, you would be taking Yosemite Way south to 104th and then continuing that way. I'm having a hard time remembering if we do have I believe it's called the pork chop median that would, for that right in, right out, that would prevent folks from turning left there. But I can certainly bring up some construction documents and take a look for you.
So Andrew, this is Brent Soderlin, the city engineer. I was wondering if I could just jump in with a comment.
Please.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so if you're going to take a left out of the new subdivision, you do have to go on Yosemite Way, and then you come out at 104th Place, and would take a left to go southbound to get onto 104th. So that's how that movement would be accomplished.
Would there be a connection, Brent, to Bell Creek Boulevard? Because that's where the existing light is now, right? Just further to the east.
So there's not a connection to Bell Creek Boulevard. But there is plans to put a signal at 104th and Brighton. And that should be done within the next few months, actually. So that'll actually help the situation out for the entire neighborhood.
And the reason why there's not a connection to Bell Creek Boulevard, that's what you guys were saying, it was because of the irrigation, the floodplain that you'd have to overcome. Okay. Additional questions for staff? Is the applicant available to speak or would like to speak?
Yeah, the applicant is here. They have a presentation that they can go over as well. So Jessica or Trish can get that lined up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. I assume Can anyone see me?
Can't see you, but
okay, I think that's set up then just for audio. All right, so my name is Dan Sheldon with United Development Companies. I appreciate you taking the time.
we lost you.
I think it's trying to join him as a panelist. There he is.
Oh, there we are. Okay, now you can see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, super. Hi, thanks again. My name is Dan Sheldon with United Development Companies. Appreciate your time tonight. As Andrew did a very nice job of taking you through our project, we're real pleased to be bringing this into the city. This is one of many, many projects that we've done with our home builder partner, Richmond American Homes. We are not big, typically we don't do big master plan communities. We are more of a niche infill 50 to 100 lot subdivision developer. And what we really like about this site is that it's on your border to be annexed and zoned, and it's somewhat of an entry into the city, and it really will help provide a good feeling for and a fresher feeling for that part of the city right now, compared to some of the stuff that's older and adjacent to it, to the south and to the west. And we have a PowerPoint that I'd like to walk you through here as well. I will tell you that a lot of it is the same stuff that you just got done seeing from staff. So we'll go through that. I do have with me, I don't know who all is available via panelist and who is maybe on via telephone, and maybe some aren't on at all, but I do have with me, I'm just going to introduce kind of my team here. I've got civil engineering and our traffic engineers from Harris Coker Smith are available with us on the call to answer any questions about traffic or civil design. I've also got Norris Design, who's my planning and landscape architecture firm. They're on the line with us as well, and they're going to actually be the one taking us through this PowerPoint. And then I've also got Richmond American Homes on the call with us as well. If you have any questions about the product, the house type, the style, what they're planning on building there, and even anything regarding the interaction that we've had over the last several months with the community, either via the neighborhood meeting that we've had or via our on-site visits that we've had with some of the homeowners. We can certainly address those. Our home builder can address some of their on-site visits as well. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Mitch Black from Norris Design, if Mitch is in fact available on as a panelist right now. And if he's not, I can certainly run through the slideshow myself. Mitch, are you there?
I just promoted him. Sometimes it takes a moment.
Okay.
I am here.
Hi, Mitch.
You can hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thanks, Dan. I think everybody can see this. Like Dan mentioned, we've been working on this from last year into now, and I'm going to take you just through a very quick timeline. Andrew did a really good job of walking through a lot of the details, so we won't belabor a lot of those points, but we can show you a little bit more detail plan as well. So I think if we can go to the next slide, that would be terrific. So far, our timeline. We did start this process in the county. We were already zoned in the county for what Andrew mentioned is a very parallel or almost mirroring zone district in the county for single-family detached homes. That was in July. We had started moving forward with the neighborhood meeting there, and through that pre-application process, the city was in review of that, and we realized that due to some infrastructure services that were already in place, that we needed to be annexing to the city. So we started the city process in December with our pre-application process. Made our first annexation and zone change submittal in February of this year. We followed that with our development plan and final plat submittal once we were well underway with our annexation and zoning review. We did, I think, have the first virtual neighborhood meeting, which really was really worked out well. It was very smooth. We established platplace.com for people to view that 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time. And then we had a good dialogue that Andrew had discussed. So we're here today before you, and we're anticipating November, December hearings if we're successful, staying on the timeline that we anticipate for our Northern GID inclusion, annexation, and zone change with the City Council. So next slide, please. We've covered the site location already. It's really great to work with Richmond American Homes. They have developed this photo shows it well to in Bell Creek to the north. You'll see a plan in a couple of minutes where it's literally the same type of home, same size of homes that we're planning here. These zone districts are mirroring one another, essentially the R1C and the R1. Next slide, please. And again, looking at how this site, I think, has been planned over many years. There's connections that Andrew mentioned at Hazeltine Village, touching Brighton Road, potential connections that I think were maybe out there in Bell Creek. We have the drainage coming through the floodplain, which makes it difficult, but the city boundaries literally coming right up against it. So we just kind of look at this from the beginning as completing the puzzle in this area, trying to fit in as well as we can. Next slide, please. This plan shows, I think, the simplicity of the site. We need 2 points of access. So the Yosemite Way as well as Brighton Road accesses. We wanted to take our primary access off of Brighton Road and then extend the infrastructure, street and water from Hazeltine Village connection there, and that'd be a secondary access. Loop our water lines internally to the site, and then sewer flows and drainage flows to the west edge over there where you see the yellow asterisk. And so the site's quite simple that way, and you can see some of the remnants in the aerial photo of the use, which we think this will really clean the area up and again, kind of just complete the puzzle in the neighborhood here. You can see the floodplain over on the east edge as well. So we wanted to just connect 2 of these access points and to make this really work the best. Next slide, please. Then this is our illustrative plan. It is what is also in review with in your process at this time with a plat, 48 homes. I think it just helps for everyone to see this. We actually had an illustrative very similar to this on the website for the neighborhood meeting, so the neighbors could see literally what we're proposing here. So again, it's the 48 homes. You can see the detention open space up in the northwest corner. You can see we have a community park. In the scale, of this, it's only 2 minutes or so, 2.5 minute walk from the furthest home here. And this park will be available for these 48 future residents, as well as anyone else who wants to come into this area and enjoy the park. So fairly simple looping layout for the 2 points of access everywhere. We think, we have detached sidewalks, which we wanted to propose here, I think, which is a little different than some of the other neighborhoods. Creates that tree canopy and shade over the sidewalks. And again, this hopefully just provides a really simple look at how this completes the texture of the neighborhood. You can even see the homes to the north in Bell Creek, you can see some of those homes are literally the same models as what we're showing in this illustrative piece for Platt Place. Next slide, please. We did have the neighborhood meeting. I think Andrew covered really a lot of the topics here, but we sent out notice to 210 adjacent property owners. We had 7 neighbors attend. Andrew was there. He already went over these topics that we covered, so we don't need to spend a lot of time there, but we then followed up the next day with an email to all the neighbors that attended, summarizing that discussion. So if there's any questions around that, we can certainly talk about that a little further. But we wanted to make sure, things like perimeter fencing came up as a question, which is common when you share a backyard, maybe with an adjacent property. And we've run across that before, but Richmond American Homes talked about if we need to, when we come to that detail, we would build a second fence rather than disrupting any of the neighbors' existing fences. But those are some of the details to be worked out. We talked about tree mitigation was a question, and removal of the trees, and whatever we're required to do from a tree mitigation standpoint to meet city standards, we would meet those standards with our plans. And storm drainage standards would be met with the detailed design and engineering of our plat and our construction documents as well. And then I think we've talked about access in a few different ways. We certainly make the 2 points of access needed, and then really kind of working off those stubs that have been provided in the past. So I think we can just get close to wrapping this up with the next slide, please. Where are we headed as far as next steps? We have a development plan and final plat, which is under review, and we anticipate, if we are successful in getting our approvals of annexation and zoning, that would be done in early next year, 2021, with construction documents following shortly after that in the spring of 2021, breaking ground for construction in early summer of 2021, and then the first homes completed probably spring or summer of 2022, and then about an 18-month build out anticipated for all 48 homes and all of the infrastructure and park and so forth by fall of 2023. So that's where we think we're headed with our timeline. And just so usually those are fairly common questions of when will this start and what can we expect there. So I think next slide, please, would have us wrap up. And if you have any questions, as Dan mentioned, we have our full team here to address anything that you may have. So thank you for the time to present this evening.
No, thank you. Questions from the commissioners for the applicant?
This is Dennis. Can you hear me?
Yes, Dennis.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, like Commissioner Amador pointed out, why wouldn't you negotiate a right in, right out and a left in, left out on Brighton Road at your north access there? I mean, that's a real pain for somebody to go down through all of the curves. You got 5, 6, 7 different corners you got to make in order to go south on Brighton Road, and people will want to do that to get access to 104th. Why would you force them out through 104th Place when I don't see why you wouldn't be able to have a left out onto Brighton Road southbound?
I'm not sure if Andrew or someone with the city have essentially we have to have it's a right in right out situation on Brighton Road.
So Mitch, if you'd like, I can.
Yes.
Thank you, Brent.
Perfect. Thank you, Brent.
Yeah. So Commissioner, the way that we determined whether this became a right in, right out. So our transportation plan for the entire city has this classified as a minor arterial. And that would be in the future, obviously, but Brighton Road is a future minor arterial. And according to our construction standards and specifications, spacing for right in, right out is at 250 feet. And just to the south of their new access point is Contra Drive, which is about 200 feet. So I guess the reason it's restricted to a right in, right out is because of spacing. There's really not enough room to put a full movement in there with the conflict with Contra Drive on the west side.
If I may.
Did they, and I know this is a transportation thing and we really don't have any input, but was there an attempt to try to match up with Contra Drive?
If I may, I want to remind the commission that we're here for annexation zoning. So if we get too far down these other issues, we're really getting far afield from what we're actually here to review tonight.
Okay. Thank you for the reminder, Matt. Any further questions from the commissioners for the applicant? Ms. Main, did anybody register to talk today from the public?
No, we do not have anyone from the public that would like to speak at this time.
Okay. We will close the public comments. We did not read any other written portions, so I will ask for a motion for the case.
I move that the Planning Commission enter a finding that the requested annexation zoning for the property located at pins 01721094000015 and 01721094000016 contained in case Z-965-20 meets the criteria of the Land Development Code, and based upon such findings, recommend that the City Council approve the annexation zoning.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
A discussion from the commissioners. Any discussion? Ms. Main, can you call for a vote?
Commissioner Ingram?
Yes.
Commissioner Kamak?
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Amador?
Yes.
Chairman Popiel?
Yes. The motion has passed, 5 yeses, 0 no's. Thank you for the applicant and Mr. Baker for the presentation. Will the city please introduce the second case of the evening?
Sure. Tonight's second case is CU-127-20. Monroe Street Partners West is requesting a conditional use permit to develop a metal recycling facility located at 5400 Monroe Street, zoned I3, heavy intensity industrial district. Are we doing both of these cases together tonight?
Yes. So,
so
we have one presentation.
Read the other title as well, then, please.
Yep.
So the other title is CU-128-20. Monroe Street Partners West is requesting a conditional use permit to develop a demolition debris recycling facility located at 5400 Monroe Street, zoned I3, heavy intensity industrial district. And I believe Mr. Dominic Martinelli will be presenting the cases on behalf of the city this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Hayter, and thank you to members of the Planning Commission. I do believe this is the first presentation that I've given you in this new format. But I'm going to be giving the presentation on conditional use permits 127 and 128. So we're looking at two separate applications here for both a metal recycling facility and a construction debris recycling and solid waste transfer facility. The applicants are Monroe Street Partners West and Monroe Street Partners East. And the address is 5400 Monroe Street. Next slide, please. Can we move to the next slide? Yeah. So the subject property is currently zoned I3. You can generally see that this property exists on the border between Commerce City and the city and county of Denver. The majority of properties adjacent to it are also currently zoned I3. Next slide, please. So as we mentioned, the address is located at 5400 Monroe Street, currently zoned I3. The property is roughly about 10 acres in size, and it fronts along East 54th Avenue. It's currently used for sort of marginal uses, outdoor storage. A certain portion of it is vacant, and the future land use calls this property out to be general industrial. Next slide. So as you can see, the future land use plan for this entire area is generally designated as general industrial, which is the highest classification of industrial uses within the comprehensive plan. The city and county of Denver to the south has a lot of those similar uses and land use designations. So it's generally surrounded by high intensity industrial uses on all sides. Next slide. So this site has some significant history. It was annexed in conjunction with the original city boundaries at the time that Commerce City became a municipality. So in 1962, the majority of the core area of Commerce City was all annexed in. The boundaries, as you see them today on the south side, are generally what they were at that time. The 5400 Monroe property was included in that. It was originally developed by the Woodbury Chemical Company, which operated a pesticide formulation facility for roughly 15 to 20 years. It was designated by the Environmental Protection Agency as a Superfund site and placed on the national priority list in 1983 due to a high prevalence of pesticides and metals in the soil. So this existed on both the surface and the subsurface soils. There was significant remediation that occurred on this property, and it was delisted from the national priority list in 1993. Since then, it's remained mostly vacant. It's generally been used for various salvage uses and outdoor storage uses. Next slide, please. So you can see that roughly reflected within the aerial imagery here. So the right half of the property is generally used for a number of different storage and outdoor storage uses. The left side of the property is generally vacant. If you look at aerial imagery over time, you start to see some of these uses appearing here in 2007. But it mostly remained vacant for about 15 years after the remediation was completed. Next slide. So again, the greater neighborhood context, this is one of the most heavily industrialized and historically industrial areas within the city. There hasn't been a significant turnover in land uses here, so that this wasn't an area that was formerly something else. It's really been these types of intense uses for a long time. A lot of the properties surrounding it contain a variety of outdoor storage and salvage uses, auto repair, shipping container storage to the south with Denver Intermodal Express, and then a number of pipeline terminal locations. So as we mentioned, the city and county of Denver borders directly to the south. And then there's neighborhoods in Elyria, Swansea. They're generally 1,500 feet to the southwest of the subject property that are within the city and county of Denver. Next slide. So the applicant is requesting the approval of 2 conditional use permits. The first one is basically the west half of the facility will be utilized as a metals recycling facility, and the east side would be utilized as a construction debris recycling and solid waste transfer facility. The applicant's requesting 2 conditional uses because they're essentially 2 distinct uses that have separate operations and different operational components, and they're forming 2 separate LLCs to manage those separate uses in a more efficient manner. So in addition to that, the applicant is proposing an administrative subdivision of that existing parcel into roughly 2 lots consistent with the 2 separate uses. So between the two proposed lots, the applicant's proposing over 50,000 square feet in building square footage. And in addition to that, there's a number of standard site improvements that are included, meaning Article 7 of the Land Development Code. That includes a dust-free concrete surface for the majority of this site, landscaping, fencing, detention, and all of that kind of stuff. Next slide. And to break that down a little bit more directly, we kind of made a little graphic here to show which lot corresponds with which use. So they're proposing lot 1 to be roughly 5.83 acres on the west side. That would be for the metals recycling facility. And then you can see there how it complies with the Land Development Code in a number of ways. The east side would be the construction debris and recycling facility. So on the west side, they're proposing roughly 14,000 square feet in building square footage. On the east side is going to be a little bit more intense with 35,000 square feet. There is a minor modification request that is being processed with the city for a reduction of the front yard landscape buffer and fence setback from 20 feet to 16 feet. Compared to other properties of generally the same zoning classification in the city, this property has demonstrated to have a relatively unique hardship compared to others in the fact that for every 1 foot in width, this property is about 9 feet long. So in order for them to make their operations work and have enough space on the site to locate buildings and fire access and all the activities that are occurring on the site, reducing that from 20 feet to 16 is enough to make a difference in terms of how that site functions for them. And isn't a significant reduction. So that is something that the city is looking at right now for the minor modification. And then estimated jobs between the two sites, they're proposing roughly 80 jobs at this facility. Next slide, please. So we're going to zoom in on the west side of the facility here. This is a very kind of simplified graphic to give you an understanding of how the site lays out and where buildings are placed and all of that. So there's going to be a 7,600 square foot metal storage building, as well as a 7,200 square foot office and maintenance facility. On the west side of the facility, there's going to be a shredder location as well as outdoor metal storage. So basically how it works and the way that they'll get into a little bit more depth on this is that they're planning to organize their operations by ferrous and non-ferrous metals. So to make that a little bit more simple, ferrous metals are any sort of metal that contain iron and can easily be sorted through kind of magnetics. And there's differences between ferrous and non-ferrous, and they sell for different prices on the market. So they operate that basically when someone comes in and brings metals, they'll bring it to the weigh-in scales to figure out how much material they're actually dumping off and separate them by the classification, and then non-ferrous metals will be placed within the building, and then any materials and waste will be shipped via truck or rail. And then the shredder is located on the west half of the lot. Next slide. So we'll talk a little bit about the east facility now. As part of this proposal, they're proposing a 19,000 square foot transfer facility, as well as a 6,300 square foot office and maintenance facility. They're indicating that in a future phase, when market conditions allow for it, to construct a roughly 10,000 square foot construction debris recycling facility. All those sorting operations. So basically, again, as someone comes in through the site, they'll be delivering materials in, and all sorting of any sort of materials that they can recycle versus what they can't will occur within the transfer facility. Materials that they can't recycle will be shipped via truck to a landfill. And then this transfer facility will be enclosed on all four sides. The facility will be accepting construction debris upon construction of that additional phase. Next slide. These uses do have a significant environmental benefit to both the city and the Denver metro region as a whole. There are a limited number of metal recycling facilities in the Denver metro area, and there is a significant demand and use for reusing metal materials that come from a number of different sources. And the majority of metal that's produced in the United States actually comes from recycled metals. So So that's more than 60% of the iron and steel that's made in the United States comes from recycled materials such as these. It's generally more energy efficient to utilize recycled steel versus producing steel from iron ore. It reduces greenhouse gas emissions and uses less energy than making metal from virgin ore. And then ultimately, one of the major outcomes of this is that having designated metal recycling facilities such as these often divert the raw metal that goes into landfills and reserves that space for more necessary uses in landfills. Go to the next slide. And as far as we're aware, there isn't actually currently a facility in the Denver metro area that does construction and demolition debris recycling. Again, this is another environmental issue that comes up a lot, where the debris that comes from construction and demolition sites are often diverted to landfills because they don't have proper facilities to process these materials. About 569 million tons of C&D debris was generated in the United States, which is actually double solid municipal waste. And this generally includes components like doors, hardware, appliances, fixture, wood, concrete, and masonry that come from facilities and construction sites where a lot of times these can be refurbished and reutilized in new construction sites or a number of other uses. And oftentimes those get sent to the landfill without having any opportunity to sort through them and figure out what can be used and what can't. So not only does it serve that purpose, but it creates a locally sourced supply of construction materials with a lower carbon footprint, less overall distance that construction materials have to travel to actually go to construction sites. It offsets the environmental impact with the extraction and consumption of virgin resources and conserves landfill space. Next slide, please. So we're going to take a quick look at the site. We have a series of photos here. So you'll see that each image in these next 3 slides corresponds to where the photo was taken. So you can see that kind of in the aerial map, 54th Avenue is only built out on the south half, which is actually within the city and county of Denver. There's an existing fence that kind of covers the southern boundary of the property currently. And then you can see that there's it's south of a number of oil storage tanks and that type of thing in the general area. Next slide, please. So some more footage on the in image 4. You can kind of see that there's existing pallet storage and a number of different uses that's used there as well. Next slide. And then the same with that. So these photos are taken more towards the west side of the facility that doesn't have a lot of activity or current storage at the moment. Next slide. So these are just some general images that show the site plan and how they plan to utilize this. So this is for the west facility. You can see the location of the shredder. The area directly to the east of that is the proposed outdoor storage area, and then showing site improvements and things of that nature. There is an existing rail spur that feeds into, and Jessica, if you can go to the next slide, on the east facility, you'll see there's a spur of the Colorado and Eastern Railroad, or otherwise known as the Rock Island Railroad. The applicant is planning to extend that rail spur further into the site and utilize that for offloading of materials and waste and things of that nature. Next slide. And then we're just going to briefly look at the elevations for these applications. And there's a little corresponding legend at the bottom of these that show which building is being talked about here. So these are the elevations for the west side of the facility, or I'm sorry, the office location on the west parcel. You can see that it does meet the land development code standards for industrial development. Next slide. These are the elevations for the non-metal ferrous storage building. Next slide. These would be the elevations for the east office and maintenance facility. Next slide, please. And then the elevations for the proposed transfer facility, which is located on the east of the site. Next slide. And then it's a little bit difficult to see, but this is the proposed subdivision that shows a detention location to the west, a number of different access easements throughout the property, and then splitting that into a site that's 5.8 acres, and then one that's 3.8. Next slide, please. So public improvements for this location, this graphic was created to provide a little bit of context. This is a rather unique scenario for public improvements, given not only the length of this property, but given that it extends roughly 6 blocks in length, and there's various portions of the right-of-way that are constructed and portions that aren't. So generally speaking, the applicant is proposing to dedicate an additional 32 feet of right-of-way along the south edge of their property. They'll be constructing the north half of right-of-way, except for the portion between Cook Street and Monroe Street, which is highlighted in red. That's currently on the property that's utilized in the city and county of Denver for Denver Intermodal Express. There's a storage facility at that location. They're going to be providing cash in lieu for the future expansion of that when there is the ability to actually connect 54 through. So the portion between Cook Street and Monroe Street on 54th is currently unbuilt in any fashion. So to get from the east side of the property to the west side of the property, you have to drive on 54th Street, go south on Monroe Street to 52nd Street, go left to Cook Street, and then come back up 2 blocks. So there's no proposed improvements on that, given that there's no right-of-way going through, but there will be cash in lieu for a time in the future where that eventually becomes expanded. So you'll see here that they're basically dedicating that portion of 54th and then building the northern half. The northern half exists between Adams Street and Cook Street. The applicant is proposing to upgrade that to meet city standards. Next slide. There is, and because of the unique interface between the city and county of Denver and Commerce City on this location, in order for this site to actually access sanitary sewer, they're required to receive a sanitary sewer connection through the city and county of Denver's existing infrastructure. The city and county of Denver is actually going to require that they go through a request for ordinance process, which would have to be approved by Denver City Council. So in response to this, the DRT is recommending a condition B on both CU 127 and 128 that essentially states that issuance of a building permit is restricted until the city and county of Denver grants sanitary sewer access to the facility. Next slide, please. So the DRT did analyze this proposed application and found that it was compliant with the comprehensive plan and the land development code. The applicant has not only demonstrated a significant community need for recycling of such uses in the Denver metro area, but is developing a property that has a rather significant history that has remained undeveloped for a significant portion of time, and it does provide for a relatively useful infill development opportunity. The site layout is appropriate for the use. There's limited visibility from major arterials due to the surrounding neighborhood context. The applicant has proposed a landscape buffer as well as a metal fence surrounding the property to screen any outdoor operations and storage directly from street view. The applicant has demonstrated a number of proposed mitigations for potential impacts. A lot of this comes from dust. One of the major ways that they're proposing to do this is to essentially pave the facility, which reduces a lot of the dust runoff from trucks and vehicles that come in. But they're also proposing a water line that would serve the metal scrap recycling facilities to mitigate any dust that comes from that. We did refer this application out to a number of different referral entities and did not have any objections. Next slide, please. So the approval criteria for a conditional use permit as applies to this is that no substantial or undue adverse effect on adjacent property would exist. Any adverse effect mitigated to the maximum has been mitigated to the maximum extent possible. The characteristics of the site are suitable for the proposed use. It would be adequately served and will not put undue burden on improvements, facilities, or services. There's adequate assurance of continuing maintenance. No evidence that the use violates federal, state, or local requirements, and that there's a community need for the use at the proposed site, and that complies with the comprehensive plan and other programs adopted by the city. I do want to take a brief moment here to talk a little bit about federal and state regulation on this. they are required to comply with a number of regulations at the state level. So they'd be required to comply with all applicable solid waste regulations from the EPA, CDPHE, and Tri-County Health Department. So Title 40 of the Code of Federal Regulations would regulate the site as a non-hazardous solid waste transfer facility, which would have to comply with some applicable provisions of the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. There are some permits that they would have to go through with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment pertaining to regulations for solid waste and site facilities, and then a number of other requirements therein. Next slide, please. So as part of this request, the applicant is also seeking approval of the development plan. The approval criteria for these are the following four: that it complies with city standards, it's consistent with any previously approved subdivision plat, rezoning, concept plan, or other plans or land use approvals, and the development plan provides adequate mitigation for any significant adverse impacts resulting from the use, and that the development plan creates a positive precedent for the future cumulative development of the immediate area. And the development review team's assessment of this is that the proposed development plan meets that criteria. Next slide, please. So we're going to walk through recommended conditions here. For both of these applications, the city is recommending a number of conditions, and they're generally the same between both applications, but there are some minor differences that we'll highlight. So you'll see in the left-hand in the left column, we'll generally describe what the condition is. And then if the CU 128, the other conditional use permit, has the same condition recommended, it'll be noted. So the first condition recommended is that the approval applies to the development plan that's dated within the packet, that the building permit issuance would be restricted until a request for ordinance is approved by the city and county of Denver. Next slide, please. So as it pertains to the metal recycling operations, condition C states that the CUP will be allowed for metal recycling operations and storage and dismantle of passenger car and single access trucks, one-ton trucks, vans, delivery vans, Class C RVs, and small type shuttle buses. So basically anything under 22 feet in length, and that no dismantling of significantly long or large equipment would be allowed on site. And that the storage of inoperable vehicles or salvage of any other type of vehicle would require an amendment to the CUP. As it applies to the construction debris and solid waste transfer facility, all non-recyclable waste would need to be contained within the transfer facility, and all waste accepted onto the premises should be transferred into a transfer trailer within 24 hours of receipt. So basically saying that solid waste can't be brought onto the site and not brought into a proper containment vessel. Next slide. So D, these two conditions do not apply to the solid waste facility. But whole crushed cars may be stored on site for no more than 72 hours, and that no vehicle crushing shall be allowed for the metal recycling facility, and that all work performed on vehicles, so the applicant brings in kind of old vehicles to be converted into scrap or to recycled metal, that any work performed on that would need to occur entirely within a defined containment area on an approved concrete surface, and meeting basically EPA requirements that all of the fluids that come out of that, so like thinking about like gas or any sort of like motor fluids or anything like that is contained within an approved above ground holding tank and disposed of in an appropriate hazardous waste disposal facility, and that the vehicle fluids would not be discharged in any municipal storm system or sent to a municipal landfill. Next slide. So for both CU 127 and CU 128, they all have these recommended conditions that the facility shall not accept hazardous materials, including but not limited to asbestos or freon for processing. The property shall generally be kept clean and free of debris and dust. The applicant shall obtain and provide copies of any applicable state or federal regular permits to the Community Development Department prior to commencement of the operations on the site. The applicant would notify the Community Development Department in writing in the event that the use is discontinued. Next slide, please. And then the last recommended condition is J, that between January 1st and January 31st, the applicant would provide the director with a report detailing all the complaints the applicant has received from adjoining landowners during the preceding calendar year, as well as the manner in which the applicant disposed of those complaints. Subsequent reports will be due every January 31st thereon after. Within 6 years, it would be probably about 5 years from that point, the Director of Community Development will review the applicant's reports, as well as any violations reported to the city. And if it's deemed that there are violations of the conditions and that it's generally not been in compliance with the CUP approval criteria, the director may submit the CUP to the Planning Commission and City Council for review at public hearings. So this is essentially saying that if there are any scenarios where through these reports, the applicant has demonstrated that they're not meeting the approval criteria, that this could be brought back to Planning Commission and City Council for additional extension of the term. Next slide, please. Under the Land Development Code, Section 213285, the required notification was provided for this case, which included mailing postcards to 13 adjacent property owners, publication in the Commerce City Sentinel Express, and then 5 signs posted on the property for visibility purposes. Next slide, please. As of September 30th, which was the date of publication of the packet, staff has received no requests for additional information or comments on this case. Next slide. And then the development review team recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval with the conditions that we discussed to City Council for both CUP cases. Next slide. And with that, staff is available to answer any questions that you may have.
Dominic, so we'd assume access kind of follows that fire access that is listed on the overall plan? Is that how the public's getting it, or is really not public coming to this place, right? I mean, it's.
So they do allow for public drop off of some of these materials, but they do have them limited to specified Monday through Friday and Saturday drop off windows. But basically the way that they would access the site is it's primarily going to be through the east. If someone comes in through the west, I believe they have the mechanism to do that as well. But they'll basically take in materials from an access point coming off of the east side of the facility, and then that's where they'll have folks on site that will look out and be trained to inspect and look for materials that they can accept and process. So for instance, any sort of hazardous materials, and then turn them away if that's the case. But the fire access lines that we delineate in the site plan are generally the areas that they denoted that you would go through the site in terms of vehicular access and for fire access.
Okay. And there is no physical barrier, right, that they plan to install in between the two lots, right? They're just
no, they'll be able to access, each lot will be able to access each other.
Questions from the commissioners for Dominic?
Dominic, do they bring crushed cars that are already crushed onto the site?
So from my understanding, I believe they can accept them. I'll let the applicant speak to that to talk a little bit more about exactly how they conduct the operations.
Yeah, okay.
If there's no further questions, if we want to bring on the applicant to say a few words.
Dominic, who would that be?
You muted, Dominic.
Sorry, I was muted. I'm going to look here. Peter Wall would probably be the person to start with. It looks like he's currently on the call. So it looks like Ed Dolan raised his hand as well. If you could promote Ed Dolan, I think he'll actually start the presentation.
That's correct. I don't know if you can hear me, but it's going to be Ed Dolan.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. I'll turn it over to Ed. Thanks.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good evening, commissioners. Thanks for taking this time. Dominic, thank you for, one, your help over the past year, and two, for an excellent presentation. So without further ado, we can flip to the next slide. So probably we can start out here introducing you to myself. Again, I'm Ed Dolan. I'm here with Craig Uhrig, my partner. So between the two of us, we've got a combined 45 years of solid waste and recycling. We both have founded waste and recycling companies in the Denver area, built them up, were successful, are very proud of our operating history and being able to work with, excuse me, regulatory agencies, which is obviously extremely important with this, with these kinds of businesses. So if you want to go to the next one. So Monroe Street Partners both are founded because Craig and I are very committed to the environment and recycling, and we feel like we can do a good job and that there's a significant need in the Denver area. We've got, as I said before, a lot of experience operating these businesses in a safe and environmentally responsible way. With these jobs, or with these businesses, we're going to be creating jobs anywhere from lower level, entry level jobs, giving people with, lower skill sets opportunities to be employed, all the way up to managers, accountants, controllers, higher skilled people. So we're going to kind of create good paying jobs across the gamut. Next, please. Okay. So as Dominic pointed out, the property is going to be split in two. So the east side will be doing solid waste, both recycling it and transferring it to a landfill. New jobs created will be 30 plus, depending on volumes. Total investment is at least 15 million that we anticipate in the first probably 12 to 18 months between construction and equipment purchases. As Dominic touched on, the C&D recycling will be the second phase of the east side development. And because of the current economic conditions with COVID and some tensions between China, which has traditionally taken a lot of recyclables, the commodities markets have been damaged pretty significantly. But as Craig and I know, being in this for so long, these are cyclical changes and they'll come back. So, we want to be ready to be able to start recycling C&D when it is economically feasible. And, we're not that far away. And by the time we get into development, if we're fortunate enough to get the permits, we could be ready to go day one. So next. So the actual transfer facility will look something like the picture that you see to the right, enclosed on four sides where the trucks come in and out of bays with overhead doors. So if need be, say high winds or something come up, we can close those doors so that no waste will leave the building and keep the property clean. All of the waste will be inside the building at all times and transferred within there. And to go back to one of the city's requirements, it will be moved in and out in 24 hours. Not only is Commerce City requesting that, it is a state requirement that we are aware of from our past operations, and we've always abided to them. So, next. So, phase 2, the west side of the property, metal recycling facility. So, the major volume and development on this is going to be an auto shredder. And to answer your question, Commissioner, about crushed cars coming in, yes, we'll have crushed cars coming in, whole cars coming in, appliances, bicycles, all things like that. So those will come in, be processed for recycling. Most likely, that'll be loaded onto rail cars, hence the extension of the spur to the west side of the property. And and then the non-ferrous portion of the recycling, which will be occurring in the excuse me, building to the east side of the west property. All of that will occur inside due to the value of those commodities: copper, aluminum, stainless steel. One, the volume isn't nearly as great, and two, just to deter any theft. So again, the total investment here is going to be $20 million between equipment, buildings, trucks, and loaders, things like that. New jobs created, 60 plus. We do anticipate, depending on volumes, probably running 2 shifts. So if you see 60 plus jobs, it may not match up to the number of parking spots that we're proposing, but that's because there'll be multiple shifts, and not all employees drive individual vehicles. So that's where we're coming up with that number. So next slide. So we will be installing a new state-of-the-art auto shredder that, as Dominic mentioned, will have dust suppression on it. We'll also, to the greatest extent possible, and we've done this in the past, shroud the shredder, which reduces the amount of noise. So that's, what we're doing to mitigate any nuisance to the area. And then again, all of the non-ferrous will take place inside. So those are just kind of general representation pictures, not specifically, to what we're going to do, because as we go through this, we'll evaluate what the newest, best equipment is. We've always done that in our operations. So, we're in the process of evaluating what equipment we're going to use, but but those are decent representations of what the operations will look like. Next. So as Dominic presented before, this gives you a representation of what the neighborhood looks like right now and property. We think it's the appropriate neighborhood for these types of businesses. We think it'll fit in nicely. The actual property itself, we anticipate a significant upgrade in the appearance with the landscaping, with the fencing. We think this will be a benefit to the city and definitely to this neighborhood. Next. So as I mentioned before, Craig and I have had a lot of experience in this space, and we deal with all of these different agencies and have for the past 20 plus years. We're used to surprise visits from them to check on our operations. So we are dedicated to operating within the regulations. And when you're making this kind of investment, cutting corners just is it's a risk you just can't take. It's just not worth it. You know, if you've got, close to $40 million in investment, trying to cut corners here and there is just foolhardy. It doesn't make good business sense. So, we're familiar with all of these departments and what they're looking for. We work with environmental consultants to make sure that we're staying up on the latest changes to the regulations, since they do change, usually slightly on an annual basis. So just want to touch on that there, and then oversight, or the next. So frequently asked questions: how does solid waste transfer stations reduce truck trips on our roads and highways? So route trash trucks, people with pickup trucks, small haulers will come into the transfer station rather than driving all the way out to the landfill. And then we can consolidate sometimes anywhere from 10 to 20 of those small truckloads into one truckload, one semi-truckload. So, we've eliminated 9 to 19 vehicles off the roads and highways through facilities like this. How do we plan to mitigate potential issues as noise, dust, and smell? So I touched a little bit on that with the noise from the shredder. Everything else on the property will probably create no more than normal surface road traffic volume in terms of noise volume. Dust, we will be paving the entire property. We will buy, and we've done this in our previous businesses, we buy our own street sweepers, sweep the property usually at least once, if not multiple times a day. We've even gone so far in the city of Inglewood in the past to sweep the streets around our business for the city of Inglewood. Smell, the biggest mitigator of smell is moving the waste in and out of the transfer station. If it doesn't sit there, it's not going to emit odors, but it is a fully enclosed building. And so we've never had, I've never had a smell complaint in the past operations, because we do move things, the waste in and out so quickly. How long does the waste typically stay in the transfer station? To be honest with you, probably less than an hour is it, and sometimes even shorter than that. You know, if we wanted to have a facility where the waste could sit there and build up for 24 hours, we'd be asking for a building 5 times the size that we're proposing. How will we be screening? We've proposed pro panel metal screening at 8-foot height. We're willing to go big, higher, but you know that's what we're restricted to. And so in addition to that, and obviously following all the city's screening and fencing policies, you know, then we'll have landscaping outside of that also. So as those trees continue to mature, that'll further screen the property. Next. Where we are, thank you for your time. I'm open, we're open to any questions whatsoever.
Thank you for the presentation. Questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Just out of curiosity, how does Joe Henry and JRL, do they own the company, or they own the land, or what is their part in this operation?
So they're the current landowners. We have an option to purchase the land contingent upon obtaining the permits. So Joe's been supporting us. You know, we think, you know, pretty highly of him, and then, you know, he seems to think that this is good use also, but he will not, and his group will not be part of the operations going forward if we're successful.
I see. And I know Joe Henry very well as well and have the utmost respect for him for sure, but he has nothing to do with the business. And I guess maybe this is for a question for our attorney. If we were to approve this and the Monroe Street Partners West decided not to do it, could another operator come in and go through this same, use this application, or would they have to have a new business make a new application?
So CUPs are not transferable between parties. So CUP is particular to that particular owner and user. But at the same time,
owner and user, or owner or user.
Whoever the CUP is issued to. So typically, whoever's running the business gets the CUP.
Okay. Gotcha.
But so with that in mind, though, it's a little bit far afield from the review criteria for approval for the CUP.
Gotcha. Well, anything that Joe Henry's a part of, I support that immensely. Another quick question. In the addendums there's a statement that says no asbestos is allowed, period. How do you keep that from happening? You know, if I brought my 1958 Edsel in, it had asbestos fire walls in it.
So that will be accomplished through training of the employees, specifically the employees that are there to inspect the loads. I'll be honest with you, whether it's solid waste, recycling, metal recycling, cardboard recycling, anything, there's always going to be a small percentage of non-allowed material. It's, you know, people throw away batteries in their, you know, trash at the curb. They throw away their used motor oil. It's going to happen, but it's usually less than 5%, maybe even less than 3%, maybe even less than 1%. Yeah. So it's, you know, it's the EPA understands there's usually up to about a 5% non-allowed component to the waste stream. So whether that's going into tower landfill, waste management facilities, it just happens. I don't want to mislead anybody on that.
Yeah, but that typically isn't a reason for a violation then, is what you're saying.
Correct. Yeah, no, that wouldn't be. No, that happens. I mean, it's just like you said, you get in an old car like that, maybe you get one of them every 5 years. Maybe there's 10 pounds of, asbestos in it or whatever that is. You've handled, hundreds of thousands of tons, and maybe you took in 10 pounds of asbestos, but yeah, so, but it's really more of a, looking for, the obvious inspection. Yeah. And so, but, we do train our people all the time. So, yeah. And on the trash side of it, if you're obtaining a demo permit, you're gonna, that property is gonna be evaluated for asbestos. And if it's there, it's gonna be mitigated, and it will never come through a facility like ours. A asbestos remediation company, will take it to a proper landfill for proper disposal.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Kamak. Any other questions from the commissioners?
No, thank you, Commissioner Kamak, as well, for asking that question, because my question was going to be about bisecting that site with two different cases, but if they're non-transferable, no big deal.
Okay. Jessica, do we no further questions from the applicant? Then we will move on to the public comment portion. Jessica, was there anybody that registered for public comment?
No, we don't have anyone registered to speak tonight.
Okay, we will close the public comment portion of the section. Is there a motion for the case?
This is Karen. I'd be happy to make the motion, but I guess I'm going to need some help with how we deal with the conditions, since we are talking about two different applications here. So I move that the Planning Commission enter a finding that, subject to conditions, the requested conditional use permits and associated development plan for the properties located at 5400 Monroe Street, contained in case CU 127-20 and CU 12820, meets the criteria of the Land Development Code, and based upon such finding, recommend that the City Council approve the conditional use permits and development plan, subject to the...
Karen, you want to mute?
And actually, I'm sorry, Commissioner Anderson, but because we have two different cases, we're going to need a different motion for each case, as opposed to having them come together.
Okay, I will then make the motion for the first one. I move that the Planning Commission enter a finding that, subject to conditions, the requested conditional use permit and associated development plan for property located at 5400 Monroe Street, contained in case CU 12720, meets the criteria of the Land Development Code, and based upon such finding, recommend that the City Council approve the conditional use permit and development plan, subject to the following conditions. And Matt, I'm guessing you're going to want me to read all of those conditions. So,
yes, please.
We're going to do
yes, we have to do that. Keep for the record.
This approval applies to the development plan dated 8/28/20 associated with this conditional use permit. B, the building permit issuance shall be restricted until a request for ordinance RFO is approved by the city and county of Denver and for a sanitary sewer connection at the site. The conditional use, hold on, I just lost that one. C, this conditional use permit shall be allowed for metal recycling operations and storage and dismantle of passenger cars, single axle trucks, 1-ton trucks, vans, delivery vans, Class C RVs, and small type shuttle buses. All such vehicles not to exceed 22 feet in length. No other types of vehicles, including but not limited to tractor trailers, semi-trucks, full-size buses, boats, heavy construction vehicles, or mobile homes as defined in the LDC are permitted. The storage of inoperable vehicles or salvage of any other type of vehicle requires an amendment to the CUP. Whole crushed cars may be stored on the site for no more than 72 hours. No vehicle crushing shall be permitted on site. E, all work performed on vehicles, including repair, draining of fluids, and dismantling, shall occur entirely within a defined containment area on an approved concrete surface. All materials shall be contained within an approved above ground holding tank and disposed of at an appropriate hazardous waste disposal facility. Vehicle fluid shall not be discharged to any municipal storm system or within any public water supply source or surface water feature or sent to a municipal landfill. F, the facility shall not accept hazardous materials, including but not limited to asbestos or freon, for processing unless an amendment is made to this conditional use permit. The property shall be kept clean and free of debris and dust outside of the designated outdoor storage areas and beyond the perimeter of the screening fence. The applicant shall obtain and provide copies of any applicable state or federal regulatory agency permits to the Community Development Department prior to the commencement of operations on the site. I, the applicant shall notify the Community Development Department in writing in the event the use as described in this conditional use permit is discontinued by Monroe Partners West, LLC. J, between January 1st and January 31st, 2022. Sorry, my computer's decided it wants to black out this. The application will provide the director with a report detailing all complaints the applicant has received from adjoining landowners during the preceding calendar year, as well as in the manner in which the applicant disposed of those complaints. Subsequent reports will be due on or before January 1st of every year thereafter. Let me move this a little bit so I can read it. On or after January 1st, 2026, the director will review the applicant's reports as well as any violations reported to the city. If the reports and reported violations, if any, indicate the use is not compliant with the conditional use permit approval criteria, the director may submit the conditional use permit to the Planning Commission and City Council for review at duly noticed public hearings. This review will be for the limited purpose of identifying and imposing conditions reasonably necessary to address the complaints demonstrating noncompliance with the conditional use permit approval criteria and will be rationally related to the conditional use permit approval criteria.
Do I have a second? Great job, Karen.
I'll second that. Dennis.
Ms. Main, can you call for a vote?
Commissioner Ingram?
Yes.
Commissioner Kamak?
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Amador?
Yes.
Chairman Popio?
Yes. The motion has passed. 5 yeses. Can I have a motion on the second of the cases? Karen, you did so good.
Yeah, I can take this one from her and give her a breather. I move that the Planning Commission enter a finding that, subject to conditions, the requested conditional use permit and associated development plan for the property located at 5400 Monroe Street, contained in case CU-128-20, meets the criteria of the Land Development Code, and based upon such finding, recommend that the City Council approve the conditional use permit and development plan subject to the following conditions. A, this approval applies to the development plan dated 8/28/20 associated with this conditional use permit. B, building permit issuance shall be restricted until a request for ordinance, RFO, is approved by the city and county of Denver for sanitary sewer connection at the site. C, all non-recyclable waste shall be contained within the transfer facility, and all waste accepted onto the premises shall be transferred into a transfer trailer within 24 hours of receipt. D, the facility shall not accept hazardous materials, including but not limited to asbestos or freon for processing, unless an amendment is made to the conditional use permit. E, the property shall be generally be kept clean and free of debris outside of the designated outdoor storage areas and beyond the perimeter of the screening fence. F, the applicant shall obtain and provide copies of any applicable state or federal regulatory agency permits to the Community Development Department prior to commencement of operations on site. G, the applicant shall notify the Community Development Department in writing in the event the use as described in this conditional use permit is discontinued by Monroe Partners East, LLC. H, between January 1st and January 31st, 2022, the applicant will provide the director with a report detailing all complaints the applicant has received from adjoining landowners during the preceding calendar year, as well as the manner in which the applicant disposed of those complaints. Subsequent reports will be due on or before January 31st of every year thereafter. On or after January 1st, 2026, the director will review the applicant's reports, as well as any violations reported to the city. If the reports and reported violations, if any, indicate that the use is not compliant with the conditional use permit approval criteria, the director may submit the conditional use permit to the Planning Commission and City Council for review at duly noted public hearings. This review will be for the limited purpose of identifying and imposing conditions reasonably necessary to address the complaints demonstrating non-compliance with the conditional use permit approval criteria, and will be rationally related to the conditional use permit approval criteria.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Main, please call for a vote.
Commissioner Ingram,
Yes.
Commissioner Kmek,
Yes.
Commissioner Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Amador,
Yes.
Chairman Popiel.
Yes. The motion has passed. Thank you, Dominic. Thank you to the applicant for the presentation. Moving on to the rest of the agenda. There are no further cases, so the next item on the agenda is commission business. Any commission business that we need to discuss tonight? Jessica, Steve?
Just good evening, Commission. Just a couple of items that we have for miscellaneous business. The first is for next month in November, if we do have a meeting based on the schedule and on the bylaws, it falls on election night, and we don't meet on election night, and so therefore we meet the following night. So if we do have a meeting in November, it'll be Wednesday the 4th. So if you all could mark your calendars accordingly on that one. Okay. Great. And then the second item is dealing with the Comprehensive Plan Citizens Advisory Committee. And this will be a refresher for Dennis, who served on that committee back in 2010. But the City Council has approved our contract with our consultant to begin the update to the city's comprehensive plan. And that'll be a 12 to 18 month process here starting later this year. And as part of that, we're also going to do a citizens advisory committee to help with guidance and a little bit of deeper dive onto some of the issues with the comprehensive plan. And just as a refresher, according to the city charter, Planning Commission does have a big say and big oversight into the city's future planning efforts. And so two things. One is there's going to be opportunities for, I don't know what screen to look at here. There's like three of them on. As a
side view, Steve. That was your look.
Yeah, as it relates to to the role of Planning Commission with the overall comprehensive plan, there's going to be several dedicated study sessions with Planning Commission. There'll be some that are a joint meeting with City Council with you all. And so there's an opportunity for all of Planning Commissioners to obviously have an in-depth as well. But the intent is that the Planning Commissioners select at least one member to be on the, or at least recommend one member to be on the Citizens Advisory Committee. Ultimately, it's a City Council placement, but they're looking for about 16 or so members to represent the community. Some of those will come from existing boards and commissions. Some will come from the community at large. And so we have the opportunity that I believe that if there's an interest from any or all of you all, we just need to know so we can notify the city clerk. They'll be doing, as existing board members, there's not another interview needed, but if multiple planning commissioners apply, then obviously City Council will have that final say on which one or who exactly is selected. With that, I guess Jenny is our project manager currently for the comp plan. Am I missing anything on the large scale as it relates to the CAC?
Hi, Steve. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
So if you are interested in joining the Citizens Advisory Committee, we would just ask that you get Dylan, our city clerk, just a one-page interest statement for why you're interested in joining the CAC. You don't need to fill out the official application again. And I don't believe they're actually going to do interviews for existing board commission members. But if you can just reach out to Dylan with that statement of interest, or reach out to me or Steve with any questions, we'd be excited to have you on the committee.
So Steve, what are we getting with the committee that we're not going to get with our normal commission?
You probably get more interaction with the other members of the CAC in terms of some of the dialogue and some of the discussion. I mean, so you probably get a little bit more perhaps understanding of different aspects of the community that you may not get from the PC members.
And how's
Steve, is the same company going to be leading it that led it last time?
No, we have a different consultant this time. We have a consultant out of Chicago. Actually, he's doing quite a bit of work in Colorado. They just, well, I don't know, a year or two ago, they did the comprehensive plan update for Aurora and won an award for that. I believe they're also doing the comprehensive plan for Grand Junction currently as well. So they do come with a quite an extensive recommendation, but it is a different firm. So we'll see how they go forward. But we are looking at Dennis doing, in addition to the comp plan, also the transportation plan, an update to the Parks and Rec plan, and then also an update to the economic development strategic plan as well. So this particular situation though before us would just be for the comp plan, and then there would be opportunity then as those other plans start to be a part of those as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good, perhaps a little better company or consultant this time. And I definitely will be applying for sure.
Great. Steve, how's it going filling Warren's spot?
So I believe that both of our alternates applied, right, for that, and they had interviews, I think, over the past weekend or so. And so I know that the subcommittee was looking through those and making recommendations. And then they were also then looking at if they appoint one of those, then backfilling one of the alternates. Okay. So hopefully by the time November comes, we'll have we'll know the direction from council.
Okay. Moving on to legal business, Matt. Anything we need to discuss tonight?
Got nothing for you this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hayter. And any staff business, any other further staff business that we need to discuss?
No additional staff business at this time. Thank you.
And our meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all. See you next time.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right.